What if I told you that the most powerful empire of the Middle Ages wasn't built with swords or gold, but with symbols? Imagine a time when a simple image, a red cross on a white cloak, could move armies, secure fortunes, and bind together men from different lands under a single, unshakable purpose. This was the world of the Knights Templar, a brotherhood of warrior monks whose influence stretched across continents and whose legacy still whispers to us through the silent language of signs and symbols they left behind. We often think of empires in terms of territory and conquest, but the Templars understood something deeper. That true power lies in the stories we tell, the identities we forge, and the symbols that unite us. Theirs was an empire built not on land, but on meaning. In this journey, we're going to unravel how these medieval masters of imagery used symbols not as mere decorations, but as sophisticated tools, a silent code that conveyed loyalty, protected secrets, moved wealth, and commanded respect in an age of chaos and faith. From the arches of their round churches to the seals on their financial documents, every symbol served a purpose. It was a visual language that allowed them to operate across kingdoms and cultures, creating a network of trust and influence that kings and popes relied upon. Their symbols were their voice in a world without mass communication, a voice that could rally knights in battle, assure a traveler their money was safe, or signal to a fellow brother that they were among friends. You might wonder why this matters to us today, because the Templars were pioneers in something we now take for granted: branding, identity, and the power of visual storytelling. Their cross is still recognized around the world, evoking mystery, courage, and conspiracy. In many ways, they were among the first to understand that symbols could build something far more enduring than stone walls. They could build legacy. So join me as we step inside their world, decode the hidden messages etched into their architecture, etched into their artifacts, and etched into history itself. Together, we'll uncover how these symbols shaped one of the most fascinating and enigmatic organizations ever to rise from the dust of the Crusades, and how their silent empire of influence still speaks to us if we know how to listen. To understand the symbols that built their silent empire, we must first journey back to the world that created the Templars. The year was 1119. 2 decades after European crusaders had captured Jerusalem. The roads to the Holy City were perilous, plagued by bandits and marauding soldiers. Pilgrims, desperate to walk in the footsteps of their faith, were routinely robbed, kidnapped, or killed on these sacred routes. It was into this chaotic landscape that a French knight named Hugues de Payens and 8 of his companions stepped forward. They made a vow not to conquer new lands, but to protect the vulnerable. They called themselves the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, a name derived from their headquarters on Jerusalem's Temple Mount. Their mission was profoundly simple yet radical: to live as monks bound by vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but to act as warriors sworn to defend travelers with their lives. This dual identity, a fusion of the monastic and the military, was unprecedented. They were pious men who prayed for hours yet were trained to kill in defense of the faithful. Initially, they were just 9 men, so poor that historical accounts famously note 2 knights sharing a single horse, an image that would later become a powerful symbol of their humility and brotherhood. They possessed no vast wealth, no sprawling estates, only a solemn purpose, but their radical idea of the warrior monk resonated powerfully in a time of intense religious fervor. Their big break came when they gained the attention of one of the most influential churchmen of the age, Bernard of Clairvaux. This powerful abbot saw immense potential in this small band of dedicated knights. He became their champion, lobbying the church on their behalf and even writing their rule, the strict set of regulations that would govern their lives. Because of Bernard's vigorous endorsement, the order received official recognition from the Catholic Church at the Council of Troyes in 1129. This was the key that unlocked their future. The Church didn't just give them a blessing, it granted them extraordinary privileges that set them apart from every other secular or religious authority. They were made exempt from local taxes and the jurisdiction of local bishops, answering only to the Pope himself. This meant a Templar in France or England could operate outside the control of local kings and lords, a level of independence that was virtually unheard of. Donations of land and money began pouring in from nobles seeking spiritual redemption, quickly transforming the order from a small charitable militia into a landholding institution with a growing economic footprint. Their rise from obscurity to international power was breathtakingly swift. Within a few decades, the Nine Knights had blossomed into a vast multinational network. Commanderies, which were local monastic fortress complexes, sprang up across Europe and the Holy Land, acting as way stations, recruiting centers, and economic hubs. They became masters of logistics and finance, using their international presence to invent a revolutionary system where a pilgrim could deposit money at one commandery and withdraw it in another, using a coded letter as proof, a precursor to the modern banking system. They amassed immense wealth not for personal gain, but to fund their operations, becoming the bankers to kings and popes. This unique combination of faith, military might, and financial ingenuity created an organization that was both revered and feared. It was from this potent blend of identities, monk, soldier, and banker, that their need for a powerful visual language was born. They required symbols that could instantly communicate their authority, unite men from different cultures, and protect the secrets of their growing operations across thousands of miles. So from these humble yet revolutionary beginnings emerged an organization that desperately needed a way to speak across languages and borders. They were no longer just 9 knights in Jerusalem. They were a sprawling, international entity with members who spoke different languages, came from different cultures, and served in vastly different roles, from farmhands in France to battle-hardened sergeants in the Holy Land. How do you unite such a diverse group under a single banner? How do you ensure that a brother from England feels the same sense of purpose and loyalty as a brother from Italy? The answer, they discovered, was not through written decrees or spoken commands alone, but through a powerful, silent language understood by all, the language of symbols. This is where the true genius of the Templars begins to reveal itself. They were masters of what we now call semiotics, the study of signs and symbols and how they create meaning. For them, every symbol was a multi-layered message, carefully crafted to communicate on several levels at once. Take their most famous emblem, the red cross pate emblazoned on their white mantles. To an outsider, this might simply identify the wearer as a Templar, but to a member of the order and to those who understood the nuances of medieval society, this symbol was a dense packet of information. It was a proclamation of unwavering faith, a badge of honor that signified their sacred vow to protect pilgrims. It was a mark of unity, instantly creating a bond of brotherhood between knights who might otherwise be strangers. And it was a statement of authority, commanding respect from allies and fear from enemies, signaling that this warrior was not a mere mercenary but a sanctioned agent of the Pope himself. Their symbols functioned with a remarkable efficiency. On the practical level, they were identifiers. The white mantle itself distinguished a Templar from a Hospitaller or a Teutonic knight on a chaotic battlefield. But the psychological impact was even more profound. Seeing a line of these white-clad knights, each bearing the blood-red cross, created an aura of invincibility and divine favor. It was a form of psychological warfare, a brand that conveyed elite status and unwavering resolve. And spiritually, these symbols served as constant reminders of their sacred oaths. Wearing the cross was a physical manifestation of their commitment to their cause, a wearable prayer that kept their mission at the forefront of their minds. A perfect example of this multi-layered symbolism is the Boseint, the iconic war banner of the Knights Templar. Its design was starkly simple, a black section above a white one. Yet this simple standard was far more than a flag to be followed into combat. On the battlefield, it served the crucial practical function of a rallying point. In the dust and confusion of a medieval melee, knights could orient themselves toward the Boseint, regrouping around it to reform their lines, but its meaning cut much deeper. The two colors were deeply symbolic. The black represented the darkness and sin of the world they fought against, while the white stood for the purity and charitable light they were sworn to protect. For the brothers, it was a spiritual compass. Their rule even stated that losing the Boseint in battle was a grave sin, punishable by expulsion from the order, because it meant they had abandoned their sacred duty. For their enemies, the sight of the banner advancing was a terrifying omen, a signal that the most disciplined and fearless fighting force in the world was bearing down upon them. This is how Templar symbols worked. They operated on a practical, psychological, and spiritual frequency all at the same time. They were a silent, unifying code that could be read by an illiterate farm and donating to the order just as powerfully as by a learned nobleman taking the vow. They built an empire not just of stone and land, but of meaning and mind. This foundational understanding of symbols as a language is the key that unlocks all their secrets. It allows us to see their architecture, their seals, and their rituals not as random artifacts, but as chapters in a grand, visual story they were telling the world. Of all the symbols they employed, none was more central to their identity than the stark, striking image of the Red Cross pate. This wasn't a symbol they invented, but one they masterfully adopted and infused with a unique, powerful meaning that became synonymous with their order. The cross itself was, of course, the universal symbol of Christianity, but the Templars chose a specific variation, the cross pate, meaning footed, with arms that are narrow at the center and broaden out into curved arcs at the ends. Its adoption is believed to have been formally granted by Pope Eugenius III around the mid-12th century, a pivotal moment that transformed their appearance. Before this, they wore simple white or black mantles, but the addition of the blood-red cross was a visual revolution. It was a deliberate papal endorsement that marked them as a special military arm of the Church, setting them apart from all other knights and crusaders. The color was profoundly significant. Red, the color of blood, was a potent symbol of martyrdom. In the context of the Crusades, to die in the Holy Land was considered the ultimate sacrifice, a direct path to salvation. By wearing the Red Cross, each Templar was publicly proclaiming his willingness to shed his blood for Christ. It was a constant, wearable reminder of their ultimate vow. But this symbolism operated on another, more immediate level for those who encountered them. On a battlefield or a dusty road, the sight of that red cross on a white field signaled not just a willingness to die, but a formidable capacity to make others die for their cause. It fused the spiritual and the martial into a single, terrifyingly efficient image. The white mantle represented purity and chastity, the life of a monk. The Red Cross represented the violence and sacrifice of a soldier. Together, they visually articulated the Order's impossible duality, men of God who were also men of war. This symbol was far from static. It was a living part of their daily operations and hierarchy. The cross wasn't just sewn onto their battle mantles. It was meticulously reproduced on their seals, stamped into the wax that authenticated their financial documents and letters. It was embroidered on the tunics worn by sergeants, the non-noble members of the Order, though often in black instead of red to denote their different status. It was carved into the stone of their commanderies and churches. This incredible ubiquity was no accident. It was a result of strict regulation detailed in their own rule, which governed everything from their conduct to their appearance. The rules specified the exact type of cross and where it could be worn, ensuring that a Templar from England was visually identical to a Templar from Jerusalem. This enforced consistency was a brilliant tool for building a unified corporate identity across a vast, multinational organization. It meant that anyone, anywhere in Christendom, could instantly recognize a member of the Order and understand the authority they represented. Historians like Helen Nicholson have pointed out that this standardization was a key element of their power. In an age before mass media, maintaining a consistent visual brand across thousands of miles was a monumental achievement that required immense discipline. It reinforced their internal hierarchy, the quality of the cloth, the placement of the cross, all communicated a knight standing within the Order. Externally, it built a reputation for reliability and order. If their symbols were so consistent and disciplined, it implied that their entire operation, their banking, their military campaigns, their logistics, was run with the same exacting precision. The Red Cross became a trademark of trust. When a pilgrim saw that cross on a commandery, they knew their donation was going to the right place. When a king saw that cross on a financial ledger, he trusted the figures within it. It was a guarantee of authenticity in a world rife with forgery and deception. The power of this single symbol, therefore, cannot be overstated. It was a badge, a brand, a battle standard, and a sacred vow all at once. It communicated who they were, what they believed, and what they were capable of, all without a single word being spoken. It was the most public face of their silent language, a language that was about to be etched into the very stone of their buildings, creating spaces that spoke just as powerfully as any banner. But the Templar language of symbols extended far beyond the fabrics they wore or the banners they carried. It was literally set in stone, woven into the very architecture of their commanderies, churches, and fortresses. These buildings were far more than functional shelters. They were three-dimensional sermons, physical manifestations of their beliefs and power, designed to communicate specific messages to both members and the outside world. Perhaps the most iconic and telling of these architectural choices was their preference for round churches. This design was a direct and deliberate echo of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, the site of Christ's tomb and the spiritual heart of the Crusader kingdom. By replicating this rotunda form across Europe, in places like the famous Temple Church in London or the Chapel of Leon in France, the Templars created a powerful symbolic link. For a knight stationed in a cold, rainy English commandery, walking into the round church was a physical transportation to Jerusalem. It was a constant, visceral reminder of the Order's origin, its sacred duty to the Holy Land, and its divine purpose. This architectural echo ensured that every member, no matter how far from the front lines, felt connected to the central mission. The layout of a typical Templar commandery itself was a masterclass in symbolic design, reinforcing their unique blend of monastic life and military readiness. These complexes were often arranged around a central courtyard, with the church or chapel as the spiritual anchor. Other buildings, the dormitory, the refectory, the storerooms radiated from this sacred core, a physical representation of how every aspect of their lives, from eating to sleeping to fighting, was meant to revolve around their faith. The buildings were typically robust and fortified, even deep within peaceful territories, their thick walls and narrow windows speaking a language of strength, security, and self-sufficiency. This sent a clear message to the local populace. Here was an island of divine order and impenetrable safety. For the brothers living inside, this carefully orchestrated environment fostered a profound sense of cohesion and shared identity. Their daily movements through the space, from prayer in the chapel to communal meals to guard duty on the walls, were rituals performed within an architectural stage set that constantly reinforced their vows and their hierarchy. Delving deeper, we find elements that suggest even more layered meanings, possibly serving both practical and esoteric functions. Many Templar structures incorporate specific geometric patterns and precise alignments. The number 8, for instance, appears frequently, such as in the octagonal central piers of the Temple Church in London. In Christian numerology, 8 symbolizes rebirth and resurrection, themes central to the Templar identity as guardians of the site of Christ's resurrection. Some researchers have pointed out alignments of windows or pillars with solstice sunrises, potentially creating dramatic illuminations of specific altars or symbols on significant dates, turning the architecture into a giant astronomical calendar and a tool for enhancing spiritual experience. Furthermore, the prevalence of hidden compartments and secret passages, often rumored in folklore and sometimes confirmed by archaeology, speaks to the necessity of secrecy. These concealed spaces, whether used to safeguard their legendary wealth, protect sensitive documents, or allow for discreet movement, physically embedded the culture of secrecy right into the walls of their homes. They were literal vaults for both their treasures and their mysteries. To truly grasp the power of this architectural language, we can look at a specific case study, the Temple Church in London. Consecrated in 1185, its design is a perfect microcosm of Templar symbolism. The heart of the church is the round, a massive circular nave supported by dark Purbeck marble pillars, evoking the Holy Sepulchre. This space was for the knights and sergeants, a physical embodiment of their connection to the core mission. Attached to it is a rectangular chancel, added later, which was used by the clergy and the public. This architectural division subtly reinforced the social and spiritual hierarchy within the order itself. The church also served as a burial site, with effigies of knights carved into the floor, their images forever frozen in time within the sacred geometry of the round church. For a Templar, being buried here was the ultimate affirmation of a life spent in service, eternally anchored to the symbol of Jerusalem. The entire structure was not just a place of worship, it was a recruitment tool, a statement of power to the English crown, a bank for their financial operations, and a perpetual reminder to every brother of who they were and what they served. Their architecture, therefore, was their most permanent and powerful voice, a silent narrator of their faith, power, and mystery, whose stones still whisper their story centuries after the order itself was dissolved. While the Red Cross proclaimed their divine mission to the world, another symbol, used primarily to seal their most important documents, spoke to the internal heart of the Templar Brotherhood, the image of 2 knights riding a single horse. This seal, pressed into wax to authenticate orders and financial transactions, is one of the most enduring and debated images from the order. On its surface, it appears to be a straightforward representation of their early poverty. Medieval chroniclers like William of Tyre noted the order's initial humility, famously describing how the founding knights were so poor that they had to share mounts. This literal interpretation makes perfect sense. The seal served as a permanent reminder of their humble origins, a check against the pride that could come with their later immense wealth and power. It was a symbolic vow of poverty etched in wax, a promise that no matter how vast their treasury became, they would never forget the spirit of their beginnings. But to stop at the interpretation of poverty is to miss the deeper, more profound layers of meaning the Templars embedded in this image. The two knights are never depicted as struggling or strained. They are almost always shown sitting upright, riding together in a calm, unified posture. This suggests a powerful metaphor for partnership and absolute equality. They are two individuals, yet they move as one entity, sharing a single path and a single purpose. This perfectly captured the core Templar ideal of brotherhood. A knight surrendered his individual identity upon joining the order. He owned no personal property and swore obedience to his superiors. The seal visually reinforced this ethos, declaring that every member was part of a greater whole, reliant on and responsible for his brother. It symbolized their shared mission, the idea that they were all in the fight together, advancing toward a common goal through mutual support. The practical use of this seal is equally fascinating. It was employed to validate commands, official correspondence, and, most importantly, financial documents. In an age of widespread illiteracy, a unique visual symbol was a far more effective guarantee of authenticity than a signature. When a merchant or a king received a document bearing this distinct impression in red or brown wax, they knew it genuinely came from the Templars. The seal itself became a token of trust. It transformed a simple piece of parchment into a powerful instrument, a letter of credit that could move vast sums of money across continents, or a command that could mobilize men and resources. By stamping this image of shared struggle and unity onto their financial instruments, the Templars were subtly communicating the foundation of their entire economic system. It was built not on cold currency, but on the unshakable bonds of brotherhood and a reputation for incorruptible integrity. Modern scholars continue to debate the seal's true significance, adding to its enigmatic nature. Some historians, like Malcolm Barber, suggest the image may have held esoteric meanings for the order, perhaps representing the duality of their existence as both monks and warriors, two natures coexisting in a single body, much like the two knights on one horse. Others propose it could symbolize the partnership between the Templars and the Church, or even the two classes within the order, the noble knights and the non-noble sergeants, working in tandem. This very ambiguity is what made Templar symbols so powerful and ultimately so dangerous to them. A symbol that can be read in multiple ways is vulnerable to misinterpretation by those who fear or oppose it. During the Order's suppression, their enemies would seize upon this ambiguity, twisting their sacred imagery into proof of heresy and conspiracy. The seal of two knights, a mark of trust and fellowship, stands as a perfect example of how their visual language was both brilliantly clear to those within the fold and deeply mysterious to those outside it, a duality that would eventually contribute to their downfall. Beyond the powerful imagery of crosses and seals, the Templars also wielded a more literal form of coded communication, cryptic inscriptions etched into their most personal and important possessions. These weren't random phrases, they were carefully chosen linguistic codes, often in Latin, that served as constant reinforcements of their values and as subtle safeguards for their operational secrecy. While their visual symbols spoke a universal language, these written words provided a deeper layer of meaning, accessible primarily to those within the order who could understand the language and the context. A perfect example found on their official seals and documents is the Latin phrase non nobis domine non nobis sed nemini tuo do gloriam. This translates to not unto us, O Lord, not unto us, but to thy name give the glory. This is a direct quotation from Psalm 115, a psalm that celebrates divine deliverance and mercy. For the Templars, adopting this phrase was a profound statement of their core ethos. Here was an order that amassed unprecedented military and financial power, yet its official motto was a public declaration of humility, a reminder that all their victories and achievements were not for their own glory, but for the glory of God. It was a spiritual anchor, preventing the pride that often accompanies such influence, and it sent a clear message to the outside world about their purported priorities. But the use of such inscriptions went far beyond mottos on seals. They were strategically placed on objects that a Templar would interact with daily, turning mundane items into tools for reflection and reinforcement. Personal rings, for instance, might be engraved with abbreviations like SIT, standing for Sanctum Internum Templum or Holy Inner Temple, a reminder that the true sanctuary was not just the physical church but the heart and soul of the devout brother. The hilts of their swords, the tools of their violent trade, might be inscribed with prayers or the names of saints, sanctifying the instrument of death and asking for divine protection in battle. Even the architecture held these hidden messages. Above doorways or on keystones within their chapels, one might find carved phrases like Ad Diem qui litific at juventutem meme, to God who gives joy to my youth. These were not merely decorative, they were pedagogical. For an order that required its members to attend prayers multiple times a day, these inscriptions ensured that every glance, every touch, could trigger a moment of prayerful contemplation, seamlessly weaving their spiritual duty into the fabric of their everyday existence. This system of written codes also had a crucial practical application: maintaining secrecy. In an organization handling sensitive financial transactions and military communications, the ability to convey discreet messages was vital. While there's little evidence of a complex substitution cipher, historians suggest they may have used abbreviated Latin or coded references understood only by initiates. A seemingly benign phrase in a letter could carry a specific instruction when read by a trained brother. Furthermore, the very use of Latin, the language of the church and scholarship, acted as a natural barrier. It was a language not commonly understood by the lay population or even many lower-ranking sergeants within the order. This created a hierarchy of knowledge where the full meaning of certain inscriptions and documents was reserved for the literate elite, the knights and chaplains. This linguistic secrecy complemented their visual symbols, creating a multifaceted communication system that was both inspirational and impenetrable, designed to strengthen the bonds of the brotherhood while keeping their most critical affairs shielded from the eyes of a curious and often hostile world. Their revolutionary financial system, which laid the groundwork for modern banking, was built entirely upon a foundation of trust, and that trust was communicated, guaranteed, and protected through the unshakable power of their symbols. Imagine you are a 12th century English merchant planning a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. The journey is long and incredibly dangerous, fraught with thieves eager to relieve a wealthy traveler of their heavy purse of silver coins. Carrying enough money to fund your trip and perhaps even conduct some business along the way was simply not a practical or safe option. The Templars provided an ingenious solution, one that transformed the movement of wealth across continents. You could deposit your entire fortune at the temple in London. In return, the Templar bursar would issue you a letter of credit, a piece of parchment inscribed with a detailed account of your deposit. But the true value of this document wasn't in the words, it was in the symbols. The letter would be meticulously sealed with the official wax impression of the Templar cross or the seal of the two knights. This stamped symbol was your guarantee. Upon reaching a Templar house in Acre or Jerusalem, you could present this sealed letter and withdraw the equivalent value in local currency. The local Templar treasurer would examine the seal with intense scrutiny, checking for any sign of tampering or forgery. The unique, intricate details of the cross pate or the specific image on the seal were nearly impossible to replicate perfectly without the official stamp. This system meant that wealth could now travel lightly and safely, protected not by armed guards, but by the impeccable reputation and symbolic authority of the order itself. This was just one facet of their vast financial network, all of which relied on a sophisticated language of symbols to function. They didn't just move money for pilgrims, they managed the treasuries of kings and the financial assets of the papacy. When King Philip II of France needed to pay a ransom, it was the Templars who provided the funds and arranged for their secure transfer. When taxes were collected for a crusade, the revenue often flowed through Templar commanderies, their ledgers becoming the official record of Christendom's finances. These ledgers themselves were works of symbolic art. Entries were not just simple numbers, they were annotated with specific marks and sigils, unique flourishes, abbreviations, and small drawn symbols that authenticated each transaction and identified the bursar who had recorded it. This created a chain of symbolic accountability that was incredibly difficult to falsify. Even their coins, minted at some of their major preceptories, bore the distinctive Templar cross, immediately identifying them as sound currency backed by the order's vast resources and reputation for honesty. In an age where the value of coinage could fluctuate wildly based on the whims of a local lord who might debase the metal, a coin stamped with the Templar cross was a universally accepted token of pure value and unwavering trust. Their entire economic influence, therefore, was codified in this visual language. The symbols were the operating system of their financial empire. The Red Cross was more than a religious emblem. It was a trademark, a seal of approval that told a king, a pope, or a common pilgrim that their assets were secure. This reputation for incorruptible integrity was their most valuable asset, and they guarded it ferociously. The punishment for a brother who committed fraud or embezzlement within the order was severe, often leading to imprisonment and expulsion. They understood that a single breach of trust could shatter the entire symbolic framework that supported their economic power. Their financial houses were not like modern banks with vaults of gold on display. The real security was the symbolic trust embodied in their seals and crosses. This allowed them to create a system of virtual wealth long before the concept existed, where value was stored in ledgers and transferred through symbolic documents, a concept that is the direct ancestor of the checks, wire transfers, and digital banking we use today. The silent language of their symbols didn't just command armies and inspire faith. It moved empires of gold and silver without a single coin ever needing to change hands. Amidst the chaos of a medieval battlefield, where the air was thick with the din of clashing steel and the cries of men, one symbol cut through the confusion to command absolute focus: the Boseint, the war banner of the Knights Templar. Its design was stark and unforgettable, a black rectangular field positioned squarely above a white one. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed a simple, even crude standard. But for everyone on the field, friend and foe alike, this banner was a dense concentration of meaning, a psychological and spiritual anchor around which the entire Templar military machine revolved. It was far more than a piece of fabric. It was the beating heart of their presence on the battlefield, a silent conductor orchestrating their movements and broadcasting their terrifying resolve. The practical function of the Boseint was absolutely critical. In an era before radio communications or standardized uniforms, coordinating a military force during the heat of combat was a monumental challenge. The banner served as the ultimate rallying point. Templar knights, often scattered in the furious ebb and flow of a cavalry charge, would constantly orient themselves toward the distinct black and white pattern. The rule of the order was explicit on this point. If a brother became separated from the main force, his first duty was to locate and regroup around the Boseint. The sergeants tasked with carrying and protecting the banner were among the most disciplined and steadfast men in the order, for the entire tactical cohesion of the Templar contingent depended on the banner remaining visible and aloft. To lose sight of it was to become disoriented and ineffective. To lose the banner itself to the enemy was the ultimate disgrace. Yet the power of the Boseint extended far beyond its role as a mere navigational aid. Its colors were a profound and constant sermon on the Templar worldview. The black section symbolized the darkness of sin, the evil of the enemy they fought, and the death they were prepared to meet with courage. The white section beneath represented the purity, charity, and light of Christ that they were sworn to defend. This visual duality perfectly encapsulated their entire existence, fierce and merciless to their adversaries, yet pious and protective to the faithful. It was a constant, fluttering reminder to every knight of why they fought and what they represented. This spiritual significance was enforced with severe penalties. The loss of the Boseint in combat was considered such a catastrophic moral failure that the brothers responsible could face permanent expulsion from the order. Their very honor was intrinsically tied to that banner. To lose it was to lose their soul. The psychological impact of this symbol on their enemies cannot be overstated. For opposing forces, particularly those in the Holy Land, the sight of the Boseint advancing steadily toward them became an omen of impending doom. It signaled the arrival of an opponent unlike any other, a force that did not break, did not rout for plunder, and fought with a disciplined ferocity born of religious fervor. Chroniclers like William of Tyre noted the Templars' reputation for near-fanatical bravery, often fighting to the last man rather than retreating. The advancing banner became synonymous with this terrifying resolve. It was a weapon in its own right, capable of sowing doubt and fear in enemy ranks before a single sword was even swung. The sight of that black and white standard holding firm could demoralize an attacking force, while its forward momentum could break an enemy's will to fight. This deep, multifaceted symbolism, practical, spiritual, and psychological, made the Boseint the ultimate expression of Templar unity and identity in action. Its strict regulation ensured that every banner from Jerusalem to France was identical, creating a universal point of reference for every brother in the order. On the field of battle, it was the focal point that transformed a collection of individual knights from different nations into a single, unstoppable entity. The rituals surrounding its care, its deployment, and its protection were drilled into every member, creating a shared set of behaviors and priorities that reinforced their bonds. The banner's power to command order externally on the battlefield was a direct reflection of the powerful symbolic structures the Templars used to maintain discipline and cohesion internally within their own ranks. While the symbols on their banners and buildings projected power to the outside world, the true heart of the Templar Brotherhood beat in the private, sacred spaces where rituals transformed individual men into a single, unified entity. These ceremonies, often conducted behind closed doors in the chapter houses of their commanderies, were where the silent language of their symbols was not just seen, but actively performed and lived. Every aspect of these rituals, from the specific words spoken to the precise gestures used, was a carefully choreographed act of symbolic bonding, designed to forge unbreakable loyalty and reinforce the strict hierarchy that held their entire operation together. The initiation ceremony for a new brother was perhaps the most profound of these rituals. Based on the detailed regulations found in the Templar rule, we can piece together a picture of a solemn and intense process. A candidate would be brought before the assembled brothers and questioned rigorously about his background and his understanding of the harsh life he was choosing. He was warned of the hardships, the poverty, the obedience, and the constant danger. This was not a recruitment pitch, it was a test of resolve. If he persisted, the ceremony would proceed with a series of symbolic acts rich with meaning. The preceptor would ask the assembled brothers if any knew of a reason the man should not join, a public affirmation of collective responsibility. The candidate would then make his vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but these were not simple promises. They were performative utterances that, in the medieval mind, fundamentally changed his legal and spiritual status, severing his old loyalties to family and king, and binding him eternally to the order. The physical symbols employed in these rituals were equally powerful. The new brother would be presented with his white mantle, often by the preceptor himself. This was no simple handing over of a uniform. It was a deeply symbolic investiture. As the white cloak was placed on his shoulders, he was being clothed in a new identity, literally wrapping himself in the purity and purpose of the Templar mission. The subsequent ritual kiss, often on the mouth as described in some trial testimonies, was a potent symbol of acceptance and equality, sealing his incorporation into the spiritual family. These gestures and objects, the mantle, the kiss, the vows, created a powerful multisensory experience that cemented the new brother's commitment far more effectively than any written contract could. It was an immersive induction into a world where every action from that moment forward would be laden with symbolic significance. The secrecy surrounding these ceremonies was paramount. They were conducted away from the public eye, with severe penalties for any brother who revealed the specifics. This secrecy served multiple purposes. It protected the sanctity of the rites from outside scrutiny. It fostered an intense sense of privilege and exclusivity among the initiates, and it created a powerful barrier that separated the brothers from the rest of the world. To know the secrets of the ritual was to be part of the inner circle. To be outside was to be forever other. This culture of secrecy, while entirely normal within the context of medieval monastic orders, would later provide fertile ground for their enemies to plant accusations of dark and heretical practices during the trials. Beyond the initiations, the rhythm of Templar life was punctuated by daily rituals that continuously reinforced their structure and values. Chapter meetings held regularly were not just administrative gatherings but performances of justice and discipline. Brothers would confess their faults publicly, and punishments would be meted out according to the rule, often involving symbolic acts like eating meals off the floor for a period of time. These practices, while harsh to modern sensibilities, were designed to humiliate the ego and reinforce the absolute necessity of obedience and humility for the survival of the community. The daily liturgical prayers, recited together multiple times a day, used the powerful symbols of the Catholic faith, the cross, the host, the chalice, to constantly re-anchor the brothers in their spiritual purpose, reminding them that they were, first and foremost, monks. While later conspiracy theories would speculate about esoteric meanings hidden within these rituals, perhaps involving the veneration of mysterious heads or heterodox beliefs, the historical evidence firmly grounds them in the well-established traditions of 12th century monasticism. The Templars were innovating in their fusion of the military and the monastic, but their ritual life drew deeply from the same symbolic well as other orders like the Cistercians. The true power of these ceremonies was not in hidden pagan knowledge, but in their brilliant psychological use of familiar Christian symbolism to build the most cohesive and disciplined fighting force of the Middle Ages. Through these repeated performances, the abstract ideals of the order brotherhood, discipline, loyalty, were made tangible, weaving a web of shared experience that could hold a man from England and a man from Provence together in common cause on a dusty battlefield thousands of miles from home. Their influence was not confined to the walls of their commanderies or the fields of battle. The Templars masterfully extended their silent language across the very geography of the medieval world, embedding their symbols into the landscapes through which people traveled, traded, and prayed. To journey across Europe and the Holy Land during their zenith was to move through a territory subtly but unmistakably marked by their presence. They understood that to control the pathways of commerce and pilgrimage was to wield a profound form of power, and they used physical symbols as the signposts of their vast, interconnected empire. A traveler would encounter these markers constantly. On the boundaries of their extensive agricultural estates, one might find stone markers carved with the distinctive cross patée, silently declaring the land under Templar protection and jurisdiction. These were more than just property lines, they were statements of authority. For a local farmer, that carved cross meant their tithes were owed to the Templar commandery. For a potential trespasser or rival lord, it was a clear warning that this land was backed by the military and papal might of the entire order. Along the well-trodden pilgrim routes, their symbolic guidance was a lifeline. In an age before detailed maps or road signs, navigation was a perilous undertaking. The Templars erected simple yet effective markers, often a cross incised on a wayside stone or a small shrine at a fork in the road, to guide the faithful toward safety, shelter, and the next Templar house. These symbols functioned as a trusted brand of hospitality and security. A pilgrim lost in the harsh wilderness of the Pyrenees or the dusty plains of Castile would feel an immense wave of relief upon spotting that familiar cross, knowing it pointed toward a place where they could find a hot meal, a safe bed, and protection from bandits. This system of wayfinding transformed their network of commanderies from isolated outposts into a coherent, intelligible system, a spiritual and physical infrastructure that millions learned to rely on. By making travel safer, they not only fulfilled their founding mission but also encouraged the flow of people and wealth directly along the routes they controlled, further enriching and empowering their order. Nowhere is this geographic influence more vividly illustrated than along the Camino de Santiago, the Way of St. James, one of the most important pilgrimage routes in Christendom. The Templars were granted vast tracts of land in northwestern Spain, not just for their military role in the Reconquista, but to protect the endless stream of pilgrims heading to the shrine of St. James in Compostela. Their architectural imprint on the Camino is profound and strategic. They built formidable castles and fortified bridges at key river crossings and mountain passes, choke points where pilgrims were most vulnerable. The bridge at Ponferrada is a classic example. Its robust construction guaranteed safe passage, while its very presence, often guarded by knights, was a permanent stone symbol of Templar power and benevolence. In towns like Vilalcázar de Surga, they constructed massive churches that dwarfed the local buildings. These were not just places of worship, they were powerful landmarks. A pilgrim seeing the distinct, formidable silhouette of a Templar church on the horizon knew they had reached a major hub of safety and resources. The architecture itself, with its clean, powerful lines and likely adorned with their symbols, communicated stability and divine sanction in a lawless land. This territorial coding had a brilliant dual effect. For the everyday person, the pilgrim, the merchant, or the peasant, these geographic symbols represented protection, a promise of order in a chaotic world. But for kings, rivals, and the Templars themselves, they represented something else entirely, a tangible, physical manifestation of a network of control. The commanderies were never isolated. They were deliberately placed a day's ride apart, creating a continuous chain of influence. A map of their properties reveals a sophisticated understanding of logistics, dominating trade routes, fertile river valleys, and vital ports. The symbol on a boundary stone was the local expression of a global system. It meant this plot of land in Portugal was functionally connected to the treasury in Paris and the military headquarters in Cyprus. This physical network, made legible through their consistent symbols, allowed them to move not just money, but also information, manpower, and supplies with an efficiency that no kingdom of the era could match. They weren't just building buildings, they were hardwiring their influence into the landscape itself, creating a silent, stone and symbol empire that everyone could see but few could fully comprehend. This remarkable geographic influence, marked in stone and symbol across continents, was a testament to their worldly power, but the Templars' silent language did not stop at the boundaries of their own estates. It began to permeate the very fabric of aristocratic identity, finding a new and enduring home in the colorful and competitive world of medieval heraldry. The coat of arms was more than just a family logo. It was a complex visual language that proclaimed one's lineage, alliances, and martial achievements. In this high-stakes arena of symbolic one-upmanship, associating oneself with the famed Knights Templar became a powerful way for noble families to borrow a measure of their prestige, piety, and military renown. By incorporating Templar imagery, most notably the red cross pate, but also the black and white of the Boseint, or even the image of two knights on a single horse, into their own heraldic designs, aristocrats were making a sophisticated visual statement. They were signaling an affiliation, real or aspirational, with an order that represented the pinnacle of Christian knighthood. This was the medieval equivalent of a modern corporation securing a celebrity endorsement. It was a transfer of symbolic capital that lent instant legitimacy and gravitas to a noble house. We can see this fascinating borrowing play out in specific, documented cases. The powerful Zechringen family in Germany, for instance, incorporated a bold red cross into their armorial bearings, a clear nod to the Templar emblem that underscored their own crusading ambitions and their support for the military orders. In France, several families from Languedoc and Provence, regions with strong Templar ties, featured variations of the cross pate or the distinctive black and white colors in their seals and shields. But the most profound evidence of the Templars' heraldic influence is seen not in individual families, but in the official adoption of their symbolism by other great military orders. The Teutonic Knights, founded slightly later than the Templars, adopted a stark black cross on a white field for their own emblem. While distinct in its form, often portrayed as a cross potent or cross forme, the inspiration is undeniable. It communicated the same fusion of monastic piety and martial authority, leveraging a visual language the Templars had already made synonymous with holy warfare. Similarly, the Order of Christ in Portugal, which was effectively the successor organization to the Templars in that country after their dissolution, directly inherited and continued to use the classic red cross pate on a white background, a powerful visual continuation of their legacy that lasted for centuries. Heraldic experts like Mitchell Pastoro have shown that these visual choices were never arbitrary. In the grammar of heraldry, every color and every charge carried specific meanings. White or argent symbolized purity, innocence, and faith. Black or sable could denote constancy, wisdom, and sometimes grief. Red gules was the color of warrior saints, representing martyrdom, military strength, and magnanimity. By adopting this palette and these symbols, nobles and orders were consciously crafting a public image. A knight bearing a red cross on his shield was wrapping himself in the symbolic attributes of the Templars. He was declaring himself a man of faith prepared for sacrifice, a warrior of God. This was incredibly potent in a society where visual communication was paramount, especially for the majority of the population who could not read written text. Her coat of arms was a silent herald, and the Templar symbols it bore were among the most respected and recognized credentials a knight could display. This widespread heraldic adoption served to massively extend the Templars' influence far beyond their own membership roles. It created a vast, diffuse network of symbolic affiliation across the aristocratic landscapes of Europe. A nobleman who had never set foot in a Templar commandery could still project an aura of their authority by displaying their cross. It fostered a sense of shared identity and created implicit alliances, as families who used similar symbolism were visually indicating a common cause or a shared set of values. This process effectively made the Templars a permanent fixture of the medieval elite's visual culture. Their symbols, divorced from their original context and repurposed for familial pride, became embedded in the art, architecture, and artifacts of nobility, from stained glass windows and tomb effigies to tapestries and ceremonial armor. This was not a dilution of their power, but rather its ultimate expression. Their visual language had become so prestigious that it was adopted by the very class that often sought to rival their influence, ensuring that the silent empire of the Templars would continue to speak through the shields of knights and the banners of kings long after the order itself was gone. Beyond the stone of their castles and the wax of their seals, the Templars also understood the immense power of pigment and parchment, using the vibrant world of medieval art to further craft and control their legendary image. In an era where the vast majority of the population could not read written words, visual art was the mass media of the day, a direct channel to the hearts and minds of everyone from the humblest peasant to the most powerful cardinal. The order actively commissioned and influenced artworks that depicted their exploits, transforming their symbols from static emblems into dynamic elements of a grand visual narrative. These were not mere portraits, they were sophisticated tools of propaganda designed to glorify their divine mission, attract new recruits and donations, and silence critics by presenting an unimpeachable facade of piety and power. A fresco in a public church or an illumination in a precious manuscript could tell a story more effectively than any sermon, and the Templars became masters of this visual storytelling, ensuring that their version of events was the one that endured. One of the most stunning and complete examples of this artistic campaign survives in the small, unassuming chapel of Cressac in France. Here, a series of vibrant 12th century frescoes covers the walls, acting like a sprawling medieval comic book that narrates the Templars' heroic deeds in the Holy Land. The images are a riot of action and color, depicting white-mantled knights, each bearing the distinct red cross, triumphantly charging into battle against turbaned Saracen forces. The knights are consistently portrayed as larger, more robust, and more divinely favored than their adversaries. Their postures are heroic and upright, while their enemies are often shown falling, defeated, or in disarray. This is not a neutral historical record. It is a carefully curated victory lap in paint. The symbols here are active participants in the story. The red cross on each knight's chest is a recurring visual motif that unites the various scenes, ensuring that every viewer, regardless of where they look, knows exactly who the heroes are. The art served a dual audience. For the illiterate local population who attended Mass in the chapel, these images were a thrilling and accessible testament to the bravery of their local protectors, justifying the order's wealth and privilege. For the knights themselves, it was a constant reinforcement of their elite identity and a glorification of their sacred duty, a daily reminder that they were the protagonists in a holy war. This manipulation of imagery extended to the luxurious world of illuminated manuscripts, the most exclusive and expensive media of the medieval elite. Chronicles commissioned by or for the order, such as versions of the history of Outremer, often featured lavish illustrations of Templar knights in action. In these delicate paintings on vellum, the artists paid meticulous attention to heraldic detail. The specific shade of red used for the cross, the exact design of the Boseint, and the pristine white of the mantles were rendered with precision, branding the knights within the pages as unmistakably and authentically Templar. These books were not for public display. They were owned by nobles, bishops, and kings. By placing their glorified image within these objects of extreme wealth and learning, the Templars were marketing themselves directly to the decision-makers of their age. They were visually arguing for their own necessity, presenting themselves as the flawless, divinely ordained bulwark of Christendom, a narrative designed to secure continued political and financial support from the highest echelons of society. The Order's control over their artistic representation reveals a remarkably modern understanding of public relations. They were acutely aware of their different audiences and tailored their symbolic messaging accordingly. For the common people, large-scale public art in churches like Kresak offered a simple, powerful message of protection and victory. For the educated elite, complex illuminated manuscripts provided a more nuanced but equally glorifying narrative of strategic brilliance and pious dedication. In both cases, the consistent and heroic use of their symbols, the cross, the mantle, the banner, cemented a brand identity that was incredibly difficult to challenge. This artistic output created a powerful feedback loop. The more these images were circulated and seen, the more the legend grew, and the more the legend grew, the more power the symbols themselves accrued. Long before the invention of the printing press, the Templars had harnessed the power of art to build a mythos so potent that it would ultimately outlive the Order itself, ensuring that their symbols would continue to captivate and inspire long after their commanderies had fallen into ruin. This mastery of symbolic secrecy, while a source of their strength, also sowed the seeds of their greatest vulnerability. In a world of shifting political alliances and immense concentrated wealth, the Templars' necessary culture of discretion created a shadowy aura that their enemies were all too eager to fill with monstrous accusations. Their very success depended on operating within a sphere of privileged knowledge, a space where their unique symbols and rituals were understood only by initiates. This created a dangerous gap between their internal reality and external perception, a gap that King Philip IV of France would expertly exploit when he moved to destroy them. The Order's immense financial power made them creditors to kings, including Philip himself, who was deeply in their debt. Their political independence, answering only to the Pope, placed them outside his direct control. And their secretive nature provided the perfect pretext to attack them under the guise of rooting out heresy, rather than the blatant financial grab it truly was. The trial records from their suppression, beginning in 1307, are filled with confused and contradictory testimony about these secret signs. Under brutal torture, some brothers confessed to using specific gestures to recognize each other, perhaps a particular handshake, a way of adjusting the hood of a mantle, or a coded glance. Others spoke of idol worship, describing a mysterious head or a figure known as Baphomet. Modern historians largely view these confessions as the desperate fabrications of broken men trying to satisfy their torturers with whatever outlandish story they thought would end the pain. The truth is likely far less sensational but equally fascinating. The secret signs were almost certainly the ordinary, yet exclusive, symbols and gestures of their initiation, rituals and chapter meetings, the ritual kiss of peace, the specific way a mantle was bestowed, the passwords used to gain entry to a secure chapter. These were the standard, if private, practices of any tightly knit monastic order, designed to foster internal cohesion and ensure security. But to an outsider or to a prosecutor looking for evidence of conspiracy, these benign practices could be easily twisted into something sinister. This is the ultimate paradox of their symbolic shield. The very imagery that protected them, the closed doors, the private ceremonies, the coded understanding, became the primary evidence used against them. Their symbols, which had been a source of unity and strength, were weaponized by their accusers. The cross that had symbolized martyrdom was reinterpreted as a sign of apostasy. The rituals of brotherhood were recast as perverted rites. The necessary secrecy of an international banking and military operation was presented as proof of a massive conspiracy against Christendom. Their opaque visual language, which had served them so well for nearly 2 centuries, left them tragically vulnerable to misinterpretation. They had no way to easily prove their innocence to the public because so much of their operation was, by its very nature, confidential. The silent language that had built their empire could not adequately defend it in the court of public opinion, which was being ruthlessly manipulated by a king desperate to seize their wealth and erase his debts. The culture of secrecy that had been their greatest armor became the chain that bound them before their executioners. The tragic irony of the Templars' downfall is that the very symbols they crafted to protect their brotherhood became the primary weapons used to destroy them. When King Philip IV of France launched his devastating attack on the order in 1307, he understood that to dismantle an institution built on trust and mystery, he first had to poison its visual language. The charges brought against the knights were a grotesque funhouse mirror version of their own symbolism, twisting their sacred imagery into proof of diabolical conspiracy. Central to this campaign of distortion was the mysterious figure of Baphomet. The trial transcripts are filled with coerced confessions from terrified brothers, many extracted under brutal torture, speaking of a strange head or an idol they were forced to venerate. One knight, under duress, described it as a head with a long beard and 2 faces, while another spoke of a gilded figure. Modern historians like Malcolm Barber suggest this Baphomet was almost certainly a grotesque misinterpretation of a genuine Templar relic. It could have been a revered reliquary containing the head of a saint, such as Saint Euphemia, which was known to be in their possession. Alternatively, it might have been a symbolic representation used in their initiation rituals, perhaps a ceremonial head meant to symbolize wisdom or the presence of Christ, common in medieval religious allegory. To an outsider or to an inquisitor determined to find heresy, such an object could be easily misrepresented as an object of pagan worship. This pattern of deliberate misinterpretation extended to their most fundamental symbols. The Red Cross, which for nearly 2 centuries had been the ultimate emblem of Christian sacrifice, was now maliciously reinterpreted by the king's prosecutors. They alleged that during their secret chapter meetings, brothers were forced to spit upon or desecrate the cross as a sign of renouncing their faith. Again, if there was any kernel of truth to this, it was likely a horrifying distortion of a ritual meant to test faith, not deny it. Some scholars posit that initiates might have been presented with a cross and asked difficult theological questions about the nature of Christ's sacrifice, a common practice in monastic orders to reinforce humility and the understanding that true faith went beyond mere symbol worship. In the hands of their accusers, this complex spiritual exercise became a simple, damning story of apostasy. The trial transcripts themselves reveal the chilling effectiveness of this strategy. A Templar brother named Jean Taillefer, under torture, confessed to being ordered to deny Christ and spit on the cross during his reception. His testimony, like so many others, is a heartbreaking mix of coached lines and genuine confusion. He said, and I quote, "They brought a cross with the figure of Christ upon it, and told me that I should deny the one whose image was there. And I did so to my great sorrow, spitting beside the cross and not on it as well as I could." That final, desperate clarification, beside the cross and not on it, speaks volumes. It is the voice of a man trying to preserve some shred of his dignity and faith, even while being broken into confessing a crime he did not truly commit. The prosecutors were not interested in such nuances. They needed the simple, shocking headline of a holy knight defiling the cross. The most profound danger lay in the inherent ambiguity of symbolic communication. A symbol's power resides in its ability to contain multiple layers of meaning, accessible only to those initiated into its code. For the Templars, their rituals and imagery were a deeply internal language of faith and fellowship. But from the outside, this necessary secrecy created a void, and nature abhors a vacuum. Into that void, King Philip and his ministers poured every dark fantasy and paranoid fear of the age. Their secret signs of recognition became proof of a conspiracy. Their private rituals became evidence of blasphemy. Their guarded financial operations became signs of gargantuan greed. The Order's greatest strength, its ability to operate under a unified, silent code across continents, became its ultimate liability. They had built an empire on meaning, and now their enemies were using that very same symbolic language to construct a prison of lies from which there was no escape. The silent trust their symbols commanded was shattered, replaced by a loud and vicious narrative of betrayal that would echo through the centuries, forever staining their legacy. The coordinated attack began in the early hours of Friday, October 13, 1307, a date so infamous it would forever stain the concept of Friday the 13th with superstition. King Philip IV's orders were executed with chilling precision across the entire Kingdom of France. Bailiffs and royal soldiers simultaneously stormed Templar commanderies, arresting every brother they could find, from the highest-ranking officials to the lowliest sergeants. But this was not merely a military operation to seize men and assets. It was a meticulously orchestrated campaign of symbolic annihilation. The king understood that to truly break the Templars, he had to destroy more than their bodies. He had to eradicate their very identity, to shatter the visual language that had held their empire together for nearly 2 centuries. The first targets were the most visible emblems of their power. White mantles bearing the red cross were ripped from the knights' shoulders, not just to humiliate them, but to systematically strip them of their sacred identity. These garments, which had once commanded respect and fear on battlefields from Jerusalem to Spain, were thrown onto bonfires in town squares, the flames consuming the wool and the symbol alike in a public spectacle, meant to demonstrate the complete triumph of the crown over the order. The destruction extended to every facet of their material culture. Seals, those small discs of metal used to authenticate documents and guarantee the immense trust upon which their financial empire was built, were melted down or smashed. The intricate image of the 2 knights sharing a single horse, a symbol of poverty and brotherhood, was crushed into worthless scrap. Their Boseint banners, the black and white standards that had rallied them in combat, were torn from flagpoles and burned. Even the architectural symbols were not spared. Stone carvings of the cross pâté on church facades were defaced with chisels, their distinctive shape scratched out in an attempt to literally erase them from history. This was psychological warfare waged with hammers and torches. By destroying these objects publicly, Philip was sending an unambiguous message to all of Europe. The Templars were not just arrested, they were annihilated, and every symbol of their authority was now null and void. Their trusted cross was to be seen not as a mark of divine favor, but as a sign of heresy. Historical accounts from the period, including royal decrees and chronicles, reveal the calculated nature of this symbolic purge. The king's ministers orchestrated public sermons where priests would hold up desecrated Templar insignia to gathered crowds, proclaiming the order's supposed crimes. The objects themselves were entered as evidence in the subsequent trials, their very existence now twisted into something sinister. A ceremonial head, likely a saintly reliquary, was presented as the idol Baphomet. A ritual kiss, a common practice in monastic orders to signify peace and equality, was reinterpreted as a perverted act. The king's strategy was to take the order's greatest strength, its powerful, unified, and somewhat secretive symbolic language, and turn it into its greatest weakness, using its ambiguity to fuel suspicion and justify its utter destruction. The papal bull Vox in Excelso, which formally dissolved the order in 1312, did not just disband a group of men. It attempted to legally extinguish their right to exist as a symbolic entity, forbidding the use of their habits, their seals, and their very name. Yet, for all the king's ruthlessness, he could not completely eradicate the power these symbols held. While the official order was dissolved, its visual language proved remarkably resilient, slipping underground or finding new life elsewhere. In regions like Scotland and Portugal, where sympathy for the Templars remained strong or where royal power was less absolute, many knights simply melted into other orders or formed new societies, taking their symbols and traditions with them. The Order of Christ in Portugal, sanctioned by the Pope just a few years after the Suppression, became the direct and official inheritor of the Templar legacy in that nation. Its knights adopted the identical red cross patè, merely setting it upon a white background instead of a white mantle, a clear and defiant continuation of the old symbolism. Across Europe, noble families who had admired the Templars or had ancestors within the order quietly incorporated Templar imagery into their own family chapels, tombs, and coats of arms, ensuring the symbols lived on in a new heraldic context. The silent language, though officially banned, had simply gone quiet, waiting for a time when it could be spoken again. This survival against such overwhelming odds is the ultimate testament to the profound power the Templars had invested in their visual code. It was more than imagery, it was an idea, and ideas are far harder to burn than a piece of cloth or melt down than a lead seal. Yet despite the king's best efforts to erase them from history, the Templars refused to stay buried. Their symbols, once the silent language of a medieval empire, found a powerful new life in the modern world, resurrected not on battlefields or in banks, but on the pages of bestsellers and the glow of cinema screens. This remarkable transition from historical fact to pop culture phenomenon speaks to a deep, almost primal fascination with their story. The Templars have become a blank canvas onto which we project our own contemporary anxieties and desires, their enigmatic symbols serving as the perfect shorthand for ancient wisdom, secret power, and forbidden knowledge. This isn't just a historical curiosity, it's a testament to the incredible potency of the visual language they crafted centuries ago. A language that continues to communicate powerfully even when divorced from its original context. The modern revival can be traced through a series of cultural explosions, each repackaging the Templar myth for a new generation. The 1980s saw the publication of The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, a controversial work of speculative history that wove the Templars into a grand conspiracy involving the bloodline of Christ and a secret society called the Priory of Sion. While widely dismissed by academics, the book's compelling narrative laid the groundwork for the 21st century's biggest Templar blockbuster, Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code. Brown's novel and the subsequent film took these ideas and turbocharged them for a global audience, casting the Templars as the guardians of an earth-shattering secret about the true nature of Christianity. In this narrative, their symbols, the cross, the architecture, the secrecy, were no longer about faith or finance, but about protecting a hidden truth from a vengeful church. This reinterpretation, though fictional, was incredibly influential, transforming the Templar cross from a medieval religious emblem into a global icon of mystery and conspiracy. This fascination has proliferated across every form of modern media. The blockbuster Assassin's Creed video game franchise casts players as a member of a secret order waging a centuries-old war against the Templars, who are portrayed as a shadowy cabal seeking to control humanity through political and economic manipulation. Here, the Templar cross is literally the logo of the villainous corporation, Abstergo Industries, a perfect metaphor for how their symbolism has been repurposed to represent opaque, systemic control. Television series like Nightfall delve into more traditional, if dramatized, tales of their chivalric exploits and internal struggles, while heavy metal bands and clothing brands liberally use the cross pate to evoke a sense of ancient power and rebellious mystique. Even the world of finance sees echoes of their legacy. The logo for the Swiss private bank, Pictet & Cie, famously features a stylized red cross on a white shield, though the bank denies any direct Templar connection, proving how their visual brand remains synonymous with discretion and wealth. Cultural historians point to several reasons for this enduring and adaptable appeal. Dr. Richard Barber, a scholar of medieval myth, suggests the Templars perfectly embody what he calls the ruined legacy archetype. Their dramatic rise and catastrophic fall, combined with their immense, vanished wealth, creates a perfect vacuum for speculation. We know they were powerful, we know they were destroyed, and we don't know everything that happened in between, he notes. That gap is an irresistible invitation to invent, to conspiracy, and to romance. Their story contains all the essential elements of a great narrative: faith and betrayal, immense wealth and sudden poverty, noble ideals and shocking accusations. Their symbols act as keys to this narrative, instantly unlocking these themes for an audience. A filmmaker doesn't need to spend time establishing a backstory for a shadowy organization. Simply showing a character with a Templar cross on their ring immediately tells the audience that this person is connected to something ancient, secret, and powerful. Ultimately, the modern myth of the Templars is a conversation between the past and the present. We see in their secrecy a mirror of our own fears about hidden governments and corporate control. We see in their quest for relics a reflection of our own search for meaning and authenticity in a secular age. Their symbols work because they are so visually strong and so semantically flexible. They can represent holy crusaders one moment and sinister globalists the next, because their true power lies not in a fixed meaning, but in their ability to evoke a sense of connection to a deeper, hidden story. The silent empire they built with stone and parchment did not end in 1314. It simply migrated, finding a new, immortal home in the collective imagination, proving that the most enduring empires are those built not on land, but on the timeless power of a compelling symbol. What the Templars mastered in stone and wax, we now see reflected in the glowing logos on our devices and the sleek branding of global corporations. Their understanding of symbolic power wasn't just medieval innovation. It was a precursor to the very psychology that drives modern marketing, leadership, and social movements. They discovered that a symbol is far more than a simple marker. It's a vessel for trust, a trigger for emotion, and a command for loyalty, principles that multi-billion-dollar industries are built upon today. Consider the most iconic modern logos: the apple with a single bite taken out, the swoosh on a pair of sneakers, the double arches. These function with the same immediate recognition and emotional weight as the Templar cross on a white mantle. They are silent promises. They don't just tell you what a company sells, they tell you what it stands for, who it serves, and why you should trust it. This is the essence of branding, and the Templars were among history's first and most effective brand managers. They maintained a rigid consistency in their visual identity across continents, ensuring that a commandery in London was instantly recognizable as part of the same network as one in Jerusalem, much like a Starbucks in Tokyo offers the same expected experience as one in Toronto. This consistency wasn't about aesthetics. It was about building a universal reputation for reliability and order, a lesson every successful modern corporation has taken to heart. Their genius extends into the very architecture of our digital trust systems. The Templar seal, pressed into wax to authenticate a letter of credit, is the direct ancestor of the padlock icon in your web browser or the two-factor authentication code sent to your phone. Both are symbolic representations of security. The medieval pilgrim trusted the intricate, hard-to-forge details of the cross pate stamped in red wax because it was backed by the order's impeccable reputation. Today, we trust the digital symbols of encryption and verification because they are backed by the reputation of tech companies and financial institutions. The underlying principle is identical. A simple, visual token guarantees the security and authenticity of a complex transaction happening across vast, invisible networks. The Templars invented a system of symbolic trust that could span continents without a central governing body, a revolutionary concept that prefigured the decentralized trust models underlying modern cryptocurrencies and digital ledgers. Their symbols didn't just represent value, they actively enabled its safe and efficient movement, just as a digital logo today enables a one-click purchase across the globe. This mastery of symbolic communication also offers a profound blueprint for effective leadership and building cohesive communities. The Templars used their symbols not just for external marketing, but for intense internal identity formation. The white mantle and red cross transformed a diverse group of men from different nations into a single, unified brotherhood with a shared purpose. Modern organizations strive for this same level of cultural cohesion. A company's mission statement, its internal rituals like all-hands meetings, and even its casual dress code are all modern symbols designed to create a shared identity among employees, fostering loyalty and a sense of belonging that transcends individual job roles. A great leader, much like a Templar preceptor, understands that their role is to be the chief storyteller and symbol maker, consistently reinforcing the core values and mission through a shared visual and experiential language. They create a tribe with its own symbols, from team logos to shared jargon, that binds people together more effectively than any rulebook ever could. Perhaps the most powerful lesson lies in how the Templars wielded symbols to navigate the complex political landscape of their time, a skill mirrored in today's social and political movements. The cross on their mantle was a brilliantly ambiguous symbol. To a king, it could represent a powerful military ally. To a pope, it signaled devout servants of the church. To a pilgrim, it meant protection and charity. This ability for a single symbol to hold multiple, simultaneous meanings for different audiences is a cornerstone of modern political branding. Think of a national flag which can represent patriotism to one person and oppression to another, or a simple ribbon adopted by a cause which can unite millions under a shared idea. The Templars demonstrated that the most enduring symbols are not those with a single, fixed meaning, but those that are flexible enough to become a container for the hopes, fears, and aspirations of the people who adopt them. They built a silent empire of influence by understanding that true power isn't about forcing a single narrative, but about providing a powerful symbol around which others can build their own stories and alliances, a strategy visible in everything from corporate sponsorship of social causes to the viral spread of hashtag movements across social media platforms. The Templar cross was far more than a religious statement. It was a sophisticated tool of political negotiation, a visual handshake that could seal an alliance between a king desperate for legitimacy and an order wielding unparalleled international influence. Monarchs across Europe quickly grasped the power of aligning themselves with the Templars' impeccable brand of holy authority. One of the most striking methods was the incorporation of Templar insignia into royal documents and seals. When a king like Henry II of England issued a charter granting land or privileges to the order, he wasn't just making a donation, he was engaging in a calculated act of political theater. By placing the Templar cross near his own royal seal on the parchment, he was publicly associating his reign with their reputation for piety and divine favor. It was a transfer of credibility, a way for a secular ruler to borrow the sanctity of the warrior monks, suggesting that his rule was not just politically powerful, but also morally sanctioned and blessed by heaven. This visual association helped stabilize shaky regimes, legitimize controversial decisions, and present the crown as a partner in the grand, holy project of Christendom, all through the silent language of shared symbolism. This relationship, however, required the Templars to perform a breathtakingly delicate balancing act, navigating the treacherous waters between the two supreme powers of the medieval world, the papacy and the monarchy. Their symbols became the essential mediators in this high-stakes dance. To the Pope, they presented themselves as the loyal Milites Christi, soldiers of Christ, their white mantles and red crosses a constant visual reminder that they were the dedicated military arm of the Church, obedient only to Rome. This independence from local bishops and kings was their shield, granted by papal bulls like Omni Datum Optimum. Yet, to a king, the same knight in the same mantle was also a powerful baron, a landholder, a banker, and a crucial military ally within the kingdom's borders. They managed this duality by carefully calibrating their symbolic presence. In Rome, their representatives emphasized their monastic obedience. In Paris or London, their masters participated in royal councils, their very presence a symbol of the crown's access to international financial networks and elite military force. Their ability to serve two masters without fully belonging to either was a precarious feat, and their consistent visual identity was the glue that held this impossible position together, allowing them to be all things to all powers until the balance finally shattered. The Crusades provide the ultimate case study of Templar symbols functioning as a unifying political force. When armies composed of fractious nobles from different European kingdoms descended upon the Holy Land, the result was often chaotic infighting and strategic disaster. The Templars, along with the other military orders, became the stable backbone of these campaigns, their symbols cut across the petty rivalries of counts and dukes. The red cross on a white background was not French, not English, not German. It was universally Christian. For a soldier from Anjou or Flanders, lost and afraid in a foreign land, the sight of that distinctive banner on the horizon meant more than just a friendly force. It meant order, discipline, and a connection to the shared, sacred purpose that had ostensibly brought them all there. The Templars' visual language provided a common ground, a supranational identity that could, for a time, unite a diverse and argumentative coalition under a single, recognizable emblem of holy war. They became the permanent guardians of the Crusader states, their symbols representing a continuity of purpose that outlasted the fleeting visits of European monarchs, making them the true administrators of the political project of Outremer. This mastery of political symbolism offers a timeless lesson in the art of influence. The Templars understood that power is not always seized through force. It is often built through careful association and the strategic deployment of trusted imagery. In today's world, we see this same principle at work everywhere. A corporation sponsors a cultural event, aligning its logo with the prestige of the arts. A political candidate is photographed in a factory, visually associating their campaign with blue-collar values and economic strength. nations fly their flags alongside those of allies during joint military exercises, a simple yet powerful signal of unity and shared purpose. Just as a king once used the Templar cross to bolster his credibility, modern entities use symbols to borrow trust, signal alignment, and navigate complex networks of loyalty and power. The silent language the Templars perfected, one of strategic visual association and nuanced political signaling, remains one of the most potent and enduring tools for building influence, proving that the most successful empires, whether of faith, finance, or nation-states, are often those that speak most eloquently without saying a word. Their financial operations were secured by a symbolic language of trust that we would instantly recognize today as the ancestor of modern corporate branding. The sealed document a pilgrim carried from London to Jerusalem was more than a piece of parchment. It was a physical manifestation of the Templar brand promise. That intricate wax impression of the cross or the two knights was their logo, a trademark that guaranteed the authenticity of the transaction and the security of the funds. In a world rife with forgery and deception, this visual symbol cut through the uncertainty, providing a level of psychological security that was unprecedented. The reputation behind that symbol was their most valuable asset, and they protected it with a ferocity that any modern CEO would understand. The punishment for a brother caught defrauding the order or mishandling funds was severe, often involving imprisonment and expulsion, because a single breach of trust could shatter the entire symbolic framework that supported their economic power. Their entire system was a precursor to the concept of brand equity, where the value of a service is intrinsically linked to the perception and reputation of the symbol that represents it. We can see the sophistication of this system in surviving historical records, such as the account books from the Paris Temple, which served as the royal treasury for the kings of France. These ledgers were not simple lists of numbers. They were meticulously annotated with specific marks, flourishes, and sigils next to each entry. Each bursar had his own unique symbolic signature, a way of initialing his work that was difficult to replicate. This created a powerful chain of accountability, making it nearly impossible to alter a transaction after the fact without detection. The symbols themselves became a form of internal audit. Furthermore, the Templars are known to have developed early forms of double-entry bookkeeping, using visual symbols and spatial organization on the page to track debits and credits with a clarity that was revolutionary for its time. This wasn't just accounting, it was a symbolic language for structuring and verifying economic reality, a system designed to be transparent to initiates within the order while remaining impenetrable to outsiders. The psychological impact of this symbolic guarantee cannot be overstated. For a medieval king depositing his crown jewels as collateral for a loan, the sight of the Templar cross stamped on the receipt was a tangible reassurance. For an Italian merchant trusting the order with the profits from a year's worth of trade, that symbol represented a security more reliable than any royal promise or written contract. The Templars had built a reputation for incorruptibility that became legendary. It was said that their fortresses were impregnable and their word was their bond. This reputation, crystallized in their visual symbols, allowed them to operate as the trusted intermediaries between bitter rivals, even between Crusaders and Saracens at times. Their symbols transcended political and religious animosities because they represented something even more powerful: unwavering trust in the sanctity of a financial agreement. They had effectively decoupled the concept of trust from personal relationships and localized loyalties, and had re-engineered it into a portable, scalable, and universally recognized visual brand. This innovation makes them the unacknowledged pioneers of modern global capitalism. the system they created, where value could be stored symbolically in a ledger and transferred across vast distances based on trust in an institution's brand, is the direct forerunner of the financial world we inhabit today. The credit card in your wallet, the bank app on your phone, the wire transfer that moves millions across borders in seconds, all of these function on the same fundamental principle first perfected by the Templars: trust codified in symbols. The Visa logo on your card is the modern equivalent of the Templar cross on a letter of credit. It is a globally recognized guarantee that the transaction will be honored. The complex cryptographic seals that secure digital banking are the direct descendants of the intricate wax impressions that made Templar documents so hard to forge. They demonstrated that economic power could be built not just on stocks of gold and silver, but on the more elusive and potent foundation of perceived trust, a lesson that defines the entire digital economy. Their silent language of economic symbols did not just move money, it invented a new way of thinking about value itself, setting the stage for the financial revolutions that would shape the modern world. Their network of commanderies and trade routes functioned as a vast circulatory system, and flowing through these arteries was not just gold and goods, but a constant exchange of ideas and artistic influences that subtly reshaped their symbolic language. This was not a one-way street of European imagery imposed on the world. It was a genuine, if often overlooked, cultural dialogue. The Templars, stationed for generations in the heart of the Levant, were daily immersed in a visual and cultural milieu far more sophisticated and ancient than their own. They were surrounded by the intricate geometric patterns of Islamic art, the profound symbolism of Eastern Christianity, and the advanced architectural and scientific knowledge of Arab scholars. It is almost impossible to believe that this prolonged exposure did not leave its mark on their own aesthetic, and possibly even the esoteric layers of their symbolism. While the core Christian meaning of their cross remained sacrosanct, some historians speculate that the precise, interlocking patterns found in some Templar architectural detailing, on floor tiles in Cyprus or stonework in Portugal, may show the influence of the complex, non-representational art that surrounded them, an art form that sought to express the infinite nature of God through mathematics and pattern rather than figurative representation. This cross-pollination becomes strikingly evident when we examine archaeological finds from their farthest flung outposts. Take, for instance, the enigmatic Templar graffiti carved into the walls of their seaward fortress at Atlit, south of Haifa. Alongside the expected crosses and ships, we find symbols that are less easily categorized, mysterious labyrinths, unusual geometric grids, and patterns that seem to blend European and Levantine decorative motifs. These are the casual scribbles of knights and sergeants spending long years of guard duty, and their very informality suggests a natural, unconscious absorption of the visual language of their environment. Further east, the story becomes even more fascinating. There are accounts, though sometimes debated, of Templars engaging in diplomatic missions far beyond the Crusader states, even into the realms of the Assassins, the famous Nizari Ismaili order based in the Syrian mountains. While tales of secret alliances are the stuff of legend, the simple act of diplomacy itself, exchanging gifts, observing rituals, seeking safe passage, would have necessitated a basic understanding of the other's symbolic codes. A Templar envoy would have had to learn to read the signs of respect and power in a court that operated on a completely different symbolic system than his own, an early lesson in the necessities of cross-cultural communication. Back in Europe, the adoption and adaptation of Templar imagery were equally dynamic, reflecting local tastes and political realities. On the Iberian Peninsula, where the order was deeply involved in the Reconquista against Muslim rulers, their symbols took on a particularly militant and triumphant character. The cross-patê carved above the gates of a castle like Toma in Portugal is not just a religious symbol, it is a declaration of territorial conquest and Christian reconquest, its form echoing the swords of the knights who fought there. Contrast this with the Templar presence in the more settled landscapes of France or England. Here, their symbols often integrated more peacefully into the existing feudal and religious tapestry. The Round Church in London was not a stark fortress church, but a place that accommodated local parishioners and was built using familiar English stone and Romanesque styles, albeit with the distinctive rotunda plan that shouted its Templar identity. This regional variation was a key to their success. It allowed them to be simultaneously a unified, international entity and a locally integrated, relevant power. A knight from Yorkshire and a knight from Aragon would both recognize the same red cross, but the local populations would read that cross within their own specific cultural and political contexts, seeing in it either a defender of the faith, a landlord, a banker, or a liberator. This remarkable adaptability, this ability to let their core symbol be slightly tinted by the local culture without losing its essential meaning, is what transformed the Templar visual language from a mere brand into a truly universal code. It was a system flexible enough to be meaningful to an Armenian merchant in Antioch, a French peasant donating a pig to his local commandery, and a Spanish king leading a charge against Moorish forces. They demonstrated that the most powerful symbols are not rigid and brittle, but resilient and adaptable, capable of speaking to universal human desires for protection, meaning, and belonging, while allowing for local dialect and flavor. This principle is the bedrock of every successful global brand and movement today. A multinational corporation must ensure its logo and message resonate in Tokyo, Sao Paulo, and Cairo, often by subtly adapting its imagery and campaigns to local sensibilities without compromising its core identity. The Templars were pioneers of this very concept, proving that a symbol's power is not diminished by its diffusion across borders, but is instead magnified by its ability to build bridges between different worlds, creating a silent, shared understanding that transcends the limitations of spoken language. Yet for all their concrete power in finance and warfare, perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Templars lies in the shadowy realm of myth and esoteric speculation that grew around their symbols long after the order itself was gone. This is where history bleeds into legend, where the stark red cross becomes a doorway to imagined worlds of hidden knowledge and forbidden secrets. The human mind has a natural hunger for mystery, a desire to believe that behind the visible world lies a deeper, more profound truth waiting to be uncovered by those with the key. The Templars, with their sudden rise, their vast wealth, their secretive rituals, and their dramatic fall, became the perfect vessel for these projections. Their symbols, once tools of practical communication, were gradually reinterpreted as cryptic clues to a grander, hidden narrative. The most persistent of these myths is the association with the Holy Grail. This legend, popularized in the 19th and 20th centuries by authors and conspiracy theorists, posits that the Templars did not simply protect pilgrims. They discovered something beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Perhaps it was the actual cup of Christ, the Ark of the Covenant, or even genealogical proof of a sacred bloodline. Their subsequent wealth and power is then explained not by their banking innovation, but by this incredible discovery and the secret it held. Their symbols in this reading become a coded map to this hidden truth. The image of two knights on a single horse is no longer about poverty, but about the duality of the physical and spiritual worlds. The specific geometric proportions of their churches are not about architectural homage to the Holy Sepulchre, but about embedding sacred mathematical principles into stone. This reinterpretation is seductive because it replaces the complex, gradual reality of historical development, logistics, discipline, economic savvy, with a single, thrilling plot point, a secret that explains everything. Scholars of esotericism like Nicholas Goodrick Clark often explain this phenomenon as a process of symbolic drift. A symbol, once its original context is lost or forgotten, becomes a blank slate. Later generations, living in different times with different preoccupations, look at these powerful, enigmatic images and imbue them with meanings that resonate with their own worldviews. The 18th century Freemasons, for instance, who were building their own fraternal order based on allegory and symbolism, saw in the persecuted Templars a romantic precursor. They adopted and adapted Templar imagery, the cross, the Boseint, the two knights, into their own rituals, not as a direct continuation, but as a way of claiming an ancient and prestigious lineage. This Masonic adoption further fueled the idea of the Templars as guardians of an ancient wisdom tradition, an idea that was then amplified by 20th century occultists and eventually sensationalized by modern novels and films. The symbol remains the same, but its meaning is entirely reinvented for a new audience. It is crucial, however, to separate these later romantic layers from the historical bedrock. Academic historians like Helen Nicholson and Malcolm Barber have spent decades meticulously analyzing the Templar rule, their financial records, and the trial transcripts. They find no credible evidence for Grail legends, ancient wisdom, or heretical beliefs within the core of the order's documented practices. The so-called mysterious head venerated in some commanderies was almost certainly a conventional reliquary containing the skull of a saint like Saint Euphemia, a common focus of devotion in medieval Christianity. The geometric patterns in their architecture align with the standard liturgical and practical needs of the time, not with esoteric astronomical alignments. The scholar's conclusion is largely that the Templars were exactly what they appeared to be, brilliantly innovative but fundamentally orthodox Catholic warrior monks of their era, whose real history is more remarkable than any conspiracy theory could ever be. So why do these mystical interpretations persist with such vigor? Ultimately, they fulfill a deep and abiding human need. The true story of the Templars, one of administrative brilliance, economic revolution, and eventual political betrayal, is complex and requires historical context to appreciate. The myth, however, is instantly gratifying. It offers a simple, secret key to understanding power and history. It transforms the past from a chaotic tapestry of events into a designed puzzle with a solution. The enduring allure of the Templar symbol as a key to hidden truths speaks less about the medieval order and more about us, our timeless desire to believe that the world contains magic, that history has a hidden pattern, and that powerful secrets are still out there, waiting for the right person to decode the symbols left behind by the initiated. This very human longing ensures that the silent language of the Templars will never truly fall silent, continuing to whisper of mysteries just beyond our reach. Their powerful symbols were not just a shield against their enemies, but also a magnet for imitators, launching a silent war fought not with swords but with forgeries and false insignia. The immense trust and authority vested in the Templar cross made it a prime target for counterfeiters almost from the beginning. Imagine a medieval landowner seeking to avoid taxes or a local priest aiming to boost the prestige of his church. Forging a charter that appeared to be from the Templars, complete with a convincing wax seal, could be a tempting shortcut. These documents, purportedly signed by a Grand Master and granting land or privileges, were powerful tools of fraud. The Order was acutely aware of this threat and developed sophisticated methods to protect their symbolic currency. Their seals were works of intricate art, carved with specific, hard-to-reproduce details that acted as a medieval form of anti-counterfeiting technology. The specific design of the cross-pate, the posture of the two knights on the horse, even the Latin abbreviations used in the surrounding text, all were carefully standardized and known only to trusted officials within the order. A bailiff receiving a document would examine the seal's depth, its clarity, and the quality of the wax, knowing that a blurry or poorly defined impression was a likely sign of a forgery. The battle for authenticity extended beyond parchment to the very people claiming to be brothers. The order's reputation for wealth and power attracted charlatans who would don homemade white mantles adorned with hastily sewn red crosses. These impostors would travel from town to town, posing as Templar officials to collect false donations, extort money from locals, or simply live off the charity and respect afforded to the real brothers. To combat this, the Templars relied on a network of vigilance. Their rule contained strict instructions for identifying genuine members. A traveling knight would be expected to know the precise protocols for seeking hospitality at a commandery, using specific phrases and demonstrating knowledge of the order's internal hierarchy and customs. Failure to adhere to these unwritten codes would immediately reveal an impostor. This system of internal verification was a necessary defense mechanism, ensuring that the power of their symbols could not be easily hijacked by outsiders for personal gain. It was a constant game of cat and mouse, where the Templars had to continually evolve their symbolic language to stay one step ahead of those who sought to exploit it. This historical struggle finds a direct and powerful echo in our modern digital landscape. The challenge the Templars faced protecting the integrity of a trusted symbol in a world full of clever imitators is the same challenge faced by every major corporation, financial institution, and government today. The fake Templar charter sealed with a crudely copied symbol is the medieval ancestor of a phishing email adorned with a poorly replicated bank logo. The imposter in a homemade mantle is the forerunner of a fake social media profile designed to scam users. The Templars' meticulous seal craftsmanship is analogous to the complex digital encryption and holographic strips we use today to protect our currency and official documents. In both cases, the goal is identical: to make the authentic symbol difficult and costly to replicate, thereby preserving the trust that is the foundation of its value. The digital age has simply scaled this ancient battle to a global level, where a counterfeit symbol can be disseminated to millions in an instant, making the need for robust verification systems more critical than ever. The most profound lesson from this battle for symbolic control is that a symbol's power is not inherent. It is a direct reflection of the integrity and vigilance of those who wield it. The Templars understood that a single successful forgery could undermine the trust of countless genuine transactions. A pilgrim scammed by a man in a fake Templar mantle might forever distrust the order, potentially depriving it of future donations and support. They knew that their economic empire and their military reputation were built on a foundation of perceived authenticity, and they defended that perception with a seriousness that matched their defense of any physical fortress. This relentless effort to police their own image reminds us that trust is the most valuable and fragile asset any organization can possess. It must be actively protected, constantly renewed, and defended against all forms of imitation, because once a symbol's authenticity is successfully challenged, its power evaporates, leaving behind nothing but an empty shape. Every new brother who entered the Templar order faced a formidable task: to shed his former identity and be remade into a single, unified component of a vast, disciplined machine. This transformation was not achieved through lectures or written tests, but through a powerful and immersive education in a silent language. From his very first day, an initiate was surrounded by a carefully orchestrated environment where every object, every architectural feature, and every ritual gesture was a lesson waiting to be decoded. The commandery itself was his primary textbook, a three-dimensional syllabus designed to instill the order's core values of poverty, chastity, and obedience directly into his subconscious through constant symbolic reinforcement. Walking through the fortified gate, he would immediately sense the hierarchy. The church or chapel stood as the spiritual and physical heart of the complex, its prominence a daily reminder that his faith was the foundation of everything. The dormitory was stark and communal, with simple cots replacing private rooms, a tangible symbol of the poverty and brotherhood he had vowed to uphold. Even the refectory, where silent meals were taken while a brother read aloud from scripture, taught the dual virtues of obedience and humility, as every man ate the same simple fare regardless of his former noble status. This wasn't just a place to live, it was a training ground where the very walls served as silent instructors. The most profound lessons were embedded in the rituals, where symbols were not just observed but physically enacted. The ceremony of investiture, where a new brother received his white mantle, was a powerful piece of pedagogical theater. As the preceptor placed the cloak upon his shoulders, the initiate wasn't just putting on a uniform, he was symbolically being clothed in a new life of purity and purpose. The act of kissing his new brothers, described in their rule, was not merely a greeting but a visceral symbol of his acceptance into a spiritual family, sealing the bonds of equality and mutual responsibility. These rituals used potent multi-sensory cues: the feel of the coarse wool, the sound of recited vows, the sight of the assembled brothers, to forge an emotional and psychological anchor for their values. They were creating what anthropologists call a habitus, a set of deeply ingrained habits, dispositions, and ways of seeing the world that felt entirely natural to the member. A knight didn't need to consciously recall the rule of poverty when he owned nothing. His environment and daily practices constantly reminded him of it. He didn't need a manual on obedience. The structured rhythm of daily prayers, chapter meetings, and military drills trained his body to respond to command without hesitation. This educational system extended to their most important text, the Latin Rule, which was far more than a list of prohibitions. It was a symbolic guide to conduct, using vivid imagery to shape behavior. The rule didn't just say, "Be humble." It provided a symbolic action for it, instructing brothers to eat their meals off the floor on a towel if they committed a fault, turning a meal into a public lesson in humility. It meticulously dictated the design and placement of their symbols, like the red cross on the mantle, ensuring that every knight became a walking lesson in the order's identity, both to himself and to the outside world. The process of learning to read this entire symbolic ecosystem, from the architecture to the rituals to the rule, created a powerful shared mental framework among members. A Templar from Scotland and one from Sicily, who might not share a common spoken language, could nevertheless understand each other perfectly through their shared understanding of this nonverbal code. They knew what a specific gesture from a superior meant. They understood the significance of the Boseint's position on the battlefield, and they internalized the meaning behind the layout of their sleeping quarters. This shared symbolic literacy was the ultimate tool for maintaining quality control across a sprawling, multinational organization, ensuring that a Templar was a Templar, whether he was guarding a remote mountain pass in Armenia or managing a bustling farm in the French countryside. So as we've journeyed through the world of the Templars, from their humble beginnings to their tragic end, one undeniable truth emerges. Their true empire was not built on land conquered or gold hoarded, but on a silent, sophisticated language of symbols. This visual code was the operating system for their entire organization, a multi-layered tool for communication that achieved what armies and treasuries alone never could. It forged unbreakable unity among men from different lands. It protected their most vital secrets in plain sight, and it projected an aura of unwavering power and trust that made kings and popes into their clients. Think of the red cross on a white mantle. It was so much more than a uniform. It was a walking sermon, a brand, a declaration of divine mission and military might that could be understood by anyone, literate or not. It created an instant bond between brothers and commanded immediate respect from outsiders. Then consider their architectural genius, building round churches that were not just places of worship but physical portals to Jerusalem, designed with geometric precision to reinforce their sacred purpose and envelop their members in a world of symbolic meaning. And we cannot forget their financial revolution, where a simple wax seal bearing their cross became a globally recognized guarantee of trust, enabling the safe movement of wealth across continents and laying the groundwork for the entire modern concept of banking and brand authentication. These were not random acts of decoration. This was a deliberate, masterful strategy. The Templars understood something profound that still resonates today. That influence is not just about what you say, but about what you show. The most powerful messages are often those that are felt rather than heard, seen rather than explained. Their legacy, therefore, is far greater than the myths of hidden treasure or lost relics. It is a practical, timeless lesson in the mechanics of power. It teaches us that to build something that endures, you must build a shared identity. You must create systems of trust that are visible and reliable. And you must communicate your values so consistently and powerfully that they become embedded in the very environment around you. This silent language of influence is all around us even now, in the logos we trust, the flags we salute, and the digital icons we click without a second thought. The next time you see a symbol that makes you feel something, loyalty, safety, belonging, or desire, take a moment to deconstruct it. Ask yourself what it's truly communicating and what kind of empire it is trying to build in your mind. The Templars may be long gone, but their master class in symbolic power is still in session all around us if we only learn to read the signs. If you've enjoyed decoding this silent empire with me, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. I'd love to hear in the comments below which Templar symbol you find most fascinating, or what modern symbols you think wield a similar power today. Thank you for watching, and I can't wait to continue exploring history's greatest mysteries with you next time. Now that we've unraveled the silent language of the Templars together, I'm incredibly curious to hear which of their symbols captured your imagination the most. Was it the stark power of the Red Cross, the mysterious duality of the two knights on a single horse, or perhaps the commanding presence of the Boseint banner on a battlefield? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Share which symbol you find most fascinating and why it resonates with you. I read every single comment and I genuinely love hearing your perspectives. It's what makes this community of history explorers so special. If you're hungry to dive even deeper after this journey, I've put together a list of fantastic resources that I'll be pinning in the comment section. You'll find links to some of my favorite books on medieval symbolism, like Malcolm Barber's The New Knighthood, as well as information on planning your own visits to breathtaking Templar sites, from the Round Church in London to the formidable fortress of Toma in Portugal. Walking in the footsteps of the knights and seeing these symbols carved into stone is an experience that truly brings history to life. If you enjoyed decoding this hidden history with me and don't want to miss our next adventure into the past, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. We're just getting started on our journey through history's greatest mysteries, and I have so many more incredible stories and silent languages to share with you all. Thank you so much for watching and for your incredible curiosity. I am so excited to continue this exploration together. Until next time, keep looking for the hidden stories all around.